in the 19th century in these factories in Manchester. What we have seen are these mechanical linear machines that the human body has to adapt themselves. And this is one of the reasons, or because there are many reasons, many explanations concerning what is called alienation, but this is was one of the observations by Marx. But if you look at what is happening today, these cybernetic machines that we have are no longer the same as what Marx has described. And these, of course, are related to the whole different way of understanding what capitalism is today, cognitive capitalism and so on and so forth. But I think that this is closely related to the development of machine and the epistemologies underlined by machines. And also Marx's understanding of these machines or capitalism, as what I try to show, is based on a kind of, to understand capitalism as a mechanistic operation, if you analyze surplus value and so on and so forth. So today we are confronting what Heidegger called the Zydentic. Heidegger already sees this, the Zydentic as a metaphysical force, the force of metaphysics, but also the Zydentic artificial intelligence systems, which combined with social networks, with machine learning or that we have. So when there is the limit when we come back to the paradox of the chameleon. Actually, the title, The Paradox of Intelligence, is a reference to this article of Diderot. And so how can we, what can we do in this situation? In the 1950s, we saw many proposals to think of, to resist this form of alienation by, for example, implementing an organic mode operation in factories. For example, the French sociologist Georges Friedman. Georges Friedman proposed that, in fact, if we try to redo the working environment and to reprogram how, like, the rhythm of work of the worker, like, for example, the number of breaks that the worker can have, that maybe we can resolve the problem of alienation by importing this organic way of working. And it is the same, for example, in Louis Mumford's understanding of arts and technology and the future of automation. But I want to precisely what I'm trying to show is that this is no longer valid if we understand that all the cybernetic systems are based on the appropriation of the organic mode operation. And today, this shift in epistemology seems to me a major is the major direction of development of technology, which is realized, for example, in social credit systems, which is going to become global, which is going to be also deep in the program of the realization of what is called superintelligence or technological singularity, which is basically a technological project of the reactionaries. That by building a gigantic technological system, which will allow us to govern, for example, our city much better than being governed by human beings or by a bunch of idiots in the government, for example. So, from a geopolitical point of view, that we can see that our nation states are actually competing towards these gigantic systems, and depending which is more efficient. Russia, China, USA, and so on and so forth. And what I'm trying to do is, I don't have a precise answer to that, but what I'm trying to suggest is that what if we try to reopen, for example, the question of technology? What if we try to show that besides of the dominating epistemologies, actually we have other kind of the dominating technologies always have a certain epistemological, ontological, and psychological assumptions. And if we can do such analysis, can we show that actually there are some other assumptions that we can use, that mimic other epistemologies, but more concretely I call it cosmotechnics. So instead of converging, or instead of accelerating technology to an apocalyptic point, which we can call the singularity or superintelligence or intelligence explosion, that we can produce, I prefer to call it a fragmentation, not bifurcation, a fragmentation, an explosion of knowledge, which allow us to reappropriate technologies. So that's the reason for which in my latest book, I try to analyze what is called organicism and what is relation to technology. And if we go back to not only Chinese concept of technology, but maybe African, maybe Amazonian concept of technology, this technology not only include or consist of varieties of epistemologies, but they also consist of different ways of being with other beings, with the cosmos and so on. So I'm not saying that there we will find a definite response to the problem that we have, but definitely we need the opening of these questions, because I believe this is a very critical moment. So we need to reopen this question concerning nature, but of course, as I trying to show that we cannot just go back to nature, and also open up the question of technology, open up the question of art, and so on. So this is the departure point that I try to make. But problematizing the previous solutions and oppositions that were thought to be the opposition that was thought to be possible solutions, and in order to enforce diversity or diversification. So that's my short answer to
that. Thank you for the questions. When I say entropy, it's not negativity in the sense of dialectics. I am not a dialectician, not in the sense of Hegel or Marx. I believe it is the end of dialectic in this sense. It's what I call more than tragic situation. I will explain a little bit why I call that more than tragic. Now, in dialectic, you can save the negative, the toxic side. You can save it. You have an eschatology, the communist eschatology, the Christianic eschatology. In such a view, you don't have any eschatology. Nobody and nothing will be saved, because we know that the universe is self-destructive, so nothing will be saved. And how to live in such, it's a new ethic that is open, a new question of ethic. Ethic in the sense of the ancient sense of the Greeks, ethos. So I not develop that. And now I will try to answer your observations, and also the one of the question of hidden. But before, I want to try to answer your question concerning cities and the transformation of these cities. I used the expression, I couldn't develop it, so sorry, maybe it was not very clear for you. This expression, what I call complex exorganisms. A city is a complex exorganism for me. And it is composed by many, many people that are what I call simple exorganisms, like you and me. And they share exorganic functions. The street, the building, etc. They are common exorganic functions, and sharing this creates what is called a country, a locality, a town, etc. A manufacture, a place for working, or a market, etc. etc. And what is happening now is a transformation of the production of such complex exorganisms, because all those complex exorganisms are first based on building, technologies of construction. From the beginning of the Paleolithic period, what I try to say is, if we want to understand how to live today in such kind of cities that are happening, arriving everywhere in the world, because it is a stake of industrial economy and competition. So, for example, Panasonic decided to become a specialist of smart cities because they couldn't send magnetoscopes, come on, these video tape readers, and they decided to move to electronic of buildings, electronic of cities, etc. I refer to this clinic contributive when I said that in the north of Paris we are experimenting on a territory something. We are also launching at the level of all the academy of around Paris a program where the idea is to introduce in the same time the academics, the engineers, the teachers on high schools, in college, etc., the kids, the young, the students, etc., and their parents into a process of appropriation of this culture of what is called building information modeling. I don't know if you know this expression. Building information modeling is a kind of new norm. It's not exactly a norm. It is based on softwares. The leader of these softwares is American. It is Autodesk, and they are launching a system. I can show you also. I always need images for these things. They are launching a series of, thank you, a series of software, but also services, etc., for completely changing the conditions in which you can create a city. You can create a new district, for example. And, sorry, I need to find my images. With these technologies, for example, this is a software here with which an architect or an urbanist can plan, can produce what is called urban planning. Now, if you work with such a software, this software is capable also to manage the construction. Because now all the materials of the construction are tagged with RFID tags, and it's possible for robots to use that and to produce, to build a building, for example, with no workers, nobody else than only robots. So, what is the stake here for us? This is a process, complete process described by a course about building information modeling. We say ourselves that with those, and it's also the question of automation, with those technologies it's possible to transform completely the way in which you will produce a building. For example, you will be able to use clay. Why? Because using clay for a building, a big building, is extremely difficult if you don't have very good manual workers who are specialists of clay. And clay was used for such buildings in the south of Morocco, for example, in between the mountains of Atlas and the desert of Sahara. There is a place extremely beautiful where all the villages are built in clay. But it is because it never rains, you know. And if it rains, you have a very big problem because the rain destroys the houses. But now it is possible with these technologies to produce very good buildings with clay protected from humidity, from rain. And why is it important? For many reasons. First, clay has very, very good thermic qualities. And the reason for which they use it in the Sahara is because in Sahara, in summer, you have 50 degrees Celsius. It's impossible to live in 50 degrees Celsius. But in the houses, you have 35, 38. It's difficult, but it is the temperature you have in here in summer. It's possible to live there. Why? Because there is a thermic relation that is created by clay. And if we go now from Morocco to Paris, clay is considered to be waste. It's not useful. So, for example, if you build a building in Paris, you have to extract this clay to transport it at 100 kilometers from Paris. It produces a lot of dioxide of carbon, and it is very bad. So it is possible to make the Anthropocene an opportunity to produce the Neg-Anthropocene as a new economy. But for doing this, it is needed to create a new culture at a very high speed rhythm. This is the reason for which we use this with the video game Minecraft. And we are launching with the kids of this department that is La Seine-Saint-Denis, for those who know Paris, and it is a very hard department because the life is very difficult for those people. You have 140 nationalities in this territory. It is a territory where come in France all the people coming from migrants, you know. And we try to produce a new social dynamic for avoiding the civil war. And in such a dynamic, it is needed to make this territory to become a laboratory of the future of France. And to do that, we try to make everybody working also with the engineers of Vinci, for example, that is a big company for building, etc., etc., trying to invent something completely different, but it is based, and I answer to you, but now to you, it is based on a new political economy and a new critique of political economy. And this is also, for me, the answer to your question. If we don't transform the question of the hidden into a political economy, this is the reason for which I say sometimes I am post-Marxist. I say post-Marxist because I consider Marx was absolutely right when he said nothing that is not transformed into a critique of political economy is really interesting and needed for the future. Now, such a new political economy is based on a process of deproletarianization. It is not at all Marxist. You know. The future is not to the proletarians as a negative, the power of the negative, or to the contrary. It is a process of deproletarianization. Why? Because the proletarians now are replaced by robots. And even when they are lawyers proletarianized, because when they are proletarianized as lawyers, the big data are much more efficient than themselves. So the question is to use the time won with the process of automation to produce new forms of knowledge, because the only way in which you can find an exit from the Anthropocene is to revalorize knowledge. Now, knowledge is always the experience and the experimentation of the hidden. This is what is said by Heidegger. And not only in the end, for example, the last text on the 50s and the 60s, but in courses he gave in the 20s about Plato and Aristotle. And this is where they were dedicated to what is knowledge, what is episteme, etc. And it is extremely important to understand that the hidden is not metaphysical statement, it is extremely concrete. To experiment, to live, the hidden is to deal with the hidden, to play with it, and to make it productive. That is, producing truth, revealing through technology, but not only technology with practitioners of technology. But for that you have to invent from a new epistemology. And this is the question. This is the reason for which we work together, because we share this point of view that everything starts from epistemology. But it's not sufficient. It needs also what he calls episteme. And episteme is not a question of epistemology. It is an incarnation, a socialization of knowledge. So, as a sensibility, as exactly like Nietzsche said. So. I wanted to say that, and concerning, excuse me, I need to reread my notes because I don't remember the end of your question, but I wanted to, yes. Yes, I wanted to add something about what is efficiency, the question of efficiency. Today, you have, let's say, the victory, the triumph of efficiency. Amazon, particularly, is a more efficient, complex exorganism you can imagine. But it is self-destructive, because it is entropic. So we must reintroduce the question of finality. I think through Kant, but also Leibniz, Kant, not for going back to Aristotle, of course, it's not the question, but for revisiting cosmotechnics precisely, because in cosmology you have orders of magnitude, as he said, and the process of scaling between these orders of magnitude is always a question of inscription of finalities. So we have to reinscribe into political economy the question of finality through knowledge. And this is, of course, a question very difficult because, as you said, as Yuk said, the question of what he called metaphysical force appears here because you said this was your question at the level in which we have. How is it possible to imagine that? We must treat this question as a question of metaphysics, in the sense, not in the sense of the critique of philosophy by Heidegger, as it is called metaphysics, but in the sense where what is metaphysical, it is what is dealing with the question of death. Your death, the death of the world, the death of the universe. We are today entering into the common experience of the fact that everything will disappear. It's absolutely new. It's incredibly difficult to assume that. But it is absolutely possible. For example, if you can understand why you had in Auschwitz, in the concentration camp, people playing music, not only playing music, but writing music, wonderful music. It's incredible. They knew that everything was finished, and they were capable to do that. This is such a metaphysic that we have to invent. And it is absolutely possible to do it. It's difficult, it's almost impossible, but not absolutely impossible. And this is called a miracle. But myself, I call that a bifurcation. And you said, and I will answer him now, I prefer to say fragmentation, but it's not at all the same question. Fragmentation is a question of relocalization. But the problem of locality is its closure. So if you want to create a locality, not a regressive one, but let's call that, in quote marks, a progressive one, the question is openness of the locality. And such an openness is bifurcation. You can call that in another word. But so the question is how to think a new organization of localities capable to produce openness. That is to bifurcate. And this is a question of knowledge. You know, when in 403 before Christ, the Athenians imposed to Greece their alphabet, Attic alphabet. And they created something completely different because at this time you had many cities with different languages, different writings, etc. And suddenly the Athenians decided to impose a new alphabet. And this alphabet could destroy the diversity or, all to the contrary, intensify in the sense of Deleuze diversity. This is our deal now, our challenge. How can we, for example, with the building information modeling, that is a process of standardization, how can we create locality fragmentation? It is possible. For example, you know that there was a norm that is the origin of the World Wide Web. I can't remember the name of this norm now. That was... No, not the founder. The name of a norm was used, SGML. It was based, SGML was based on a norm that was created by the US Army for cataloging their piece, their material. They had billions things to classify. And you had the norm SGML, that means standardized, generalized markup language. But you could have your norm SGML in Oxford different from Paris, different from everywhere, because the system was based on genericity open to specifications, local specifications. It's extremely important. We have to reinvent that today. When I showed previously the screen with my students, it's impossible to realize this on the platforms today because they reject completely that. But it is because the norm they use is now closed. But it is absolutely possible to open it. And for me, myself, I try to create new connections between America, Asia, and Europe for making a group, for creating a group, for proposing that to the United Nations. And to create, and you can, if you are interested, we are launching this program in Paris, in the Pompidou Center, on 17th of December, and we will try to launch it for the United Nations the 10th of January. We will organize a meeting that is called Replying to Greta Thunberg and Antonio Guterres. And we propose with scientists, engineers, lawyers, economists, etc., a methodology for creating such a turn at the level of the globe. Of course, it's very improbable that this will work, but we must try.
Thank you. Outcomes are overdue, but there's a wonderful discussion. So let's thank the speakers. Thank you for your participation and the questions.